Welcome to the homework help video for homework 4. In this video, we will work through completing the box office sales problem. The project we are going to complete in this video is designed to be very similar to your homework 4, but it is not the actual assignment you need to complete for your grade. This project completes the same types of tasks in the same order, but with a different data set than your actual assignment. You will not receive credit for completing the homework help project shown in this video. This homework help project uses Microsoft Access, which is only supported on Windows. If you have a Mac, to complete this project, you will need to follow the instructions in eCampus to use Azure Virtual Desktop to access a Windows computer. To get started, I'm going to open up Microsoft Access and we'll create a blank database. So here in Access, I'll go ahead and click the blank database button. I'm going to browse for where I want to put my file. And I'm going to go and put it on my desktop so that it's easy to find. The instructions give me the file name to use in step 1. So this is going to be hwhelp4 underscore BOSP for box office sales problem underscore my last name underscore my first name .accdb. Then I'll go ahead and click OK and click the create button to make my database. We're not going to use this starter table 1 that it gives us, so I'll just click X to close out of it. This assignment is a bit different than the other homeworks that we've done so far in that there aren't any data files for us to import. All of the data that we're going to use is going to be typed in, so all of that is provided as part of the instructions. We're going to start off in step 2 by creating a table to store information about distributors. Let's go ahead and create a new table in Design View. So I'm going to go to the Create ribbon and click on Table Design. And the instructions give us 2 fields worth of data to store: distributor abbreviation and distributor name. Now, when we name fields in a database, we normally want to avoid spaces. So I'm going to essentially run the multiple words that are part of the names of each of these fields in the instructions together. And I'm actually going to shorten them up a little bit. Our first field here is going to be the abbreviation of the distributor. So we'll call this one distributor ABBRV, just using an abbreviation for the word abbreviation. And this is going to store a couple letters of text, so short text is an appropriate type for this one. The other field that we're going to have is the distributor name. So I'm just going to run those 2 words together. We'll get distributor name, and these names are less than 255 characters, so short text is also appropriate here. The instructions tell us that we want to designate the abbreviation as our primary key. So I'm going to go ahead and click up in that row for distributor abbreviation, and I'll click the primary key button on the Table Design ribbon. Let's go ahead and save our table. The instructions tell us we should name this as distributors. And then I'm going to switch over to Datasheet View by clicking the button on the left side of the ribbon here and type in the values that we need to have for our different distributors. And I just went and made these columns a little bit wider so I could better see what I was typing in. We're going to have 5 records here. The first one's going to be for Disney. So the abbreviation is DIS and the distributor name is Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. After I've entered the last of the 5 records, I'm going to go ahead and save my changes since I did change the layout of this table by making those columns a little bit wider, and then I'll close out of the distributors table. For step 3, we're going to create a genres table, and this one is going to look very similar to that last table. We'll go back to the Create ribbon and click on Table Design. For this one, we're going to have a genre abbreviation or genre ABBRV field. This one will be short text, and the instructions tell us that we should make it be our primary key. And then we're also going to have a genre name table, and that one will be short text as well because we're dealing with basically 1 to 2 word genre names. We'll go ahead and save this table, and I'm going to call it genres, and we'll click OK. We can go head over to Datasheet View by clicking the button on the left side of the ribbon, and we'll just resize things here so that we can see what we're typing in again. We'll save those changes. And then we're going to type in the records for 8 different genres that are given in the instructions. We'll start off with the abbreviation ANI for animation, and then we'll finish typing the rest. Once we finish typing in our values, we can go ahead and close out the genres table. In step 4a, we're going to create a table called movies for information about each of the individual movies that was in the top 15 box office sales for the year. Let's go to the create ribbon for this one, and we're going to go back to table design. Now, for this particular question, the instructions tell us step by step what we need to do for each of these fields, or at least details about what's expected. To start off, our primary key is going to be an auto number type field to store an ID number. I'm just going to call this field ID, and for the data type, I'm going to choose auto number. With an auto number field, Access will automatically give each value an incrementing number. So we'll start off with 1, 2, 3, and so on, so that each of these gets a unique value. I go ahead and make this be my primary key as well, because that's really the reason why you would normally use an auto number type, is that you want it to be your key and you want to make sure that you have unique values for each record. Next, we're going to have a field to store our movie name, and movie name turns out to be a pretty good description of that field, so we'll use it as its name. And this one can be short text because we're going to be dealing with fairly short names. Our third field is going to store the distributor. We'll use distributor as the name for this field. And this one's going to be a lookup field, pointing back to the distributors table. So if I go to the data type column here on the drop-down list, I'm going to choose lookup wizard. And we want the lookup field to get the values from another table. So we'll choose that first option and click next. We're going to have it get the values from the distributors table. So with that selected, we'll go ahead and click next again. And we want to have it bring over both of the fields, distributor abbreviation and distributor name, because we'll actually display both of those for people to choose from. Go ahead and click next again. I'm not worried about sorting, so I'll just click next through this sort order screen. Here, I want to actually display the key. So I'm going to uncheck the box that says hide key column. So when people go and look at things, they'll see the abbreviation of the distributor and then the name for it. I made that distributor name field be a little bit wider, so it should hopefully be easier to read. We'll go ahead and click next again. This screen is asking us which of those two fields do we actually want to store in the table. This is the field that it's going to use as part of making the relationship. We're going to use distributor abbreviation since that is the primary key back in the distributors table as the one we're actually going to store. So with that selected, I'll click next. And on this final screen here, the instructions say that we want to enable data integrity, restricting deletes. Go ahead and click finish at this point, and we'll get this message that the table must be saved before the relationships can be created, and it's asking, do we want to save now? And I'm going to go ahead and tell it yes. And then it's going to ask us, what do we want to save the table as? And the instructions say to name this as movies. So I'll go ahead and type that in and click OK. Our next lookup field is going to be almost identical, except for this time we're going to have the lookup be for the genre rather than the distributor. I'm going to name this field as genre, and then under the data type column, I'll go back into the lookup wizard. We're going to look up the values from another table, so we'll click next. This time we're going to get from the genres table, and then we'll click next. We'll add both of our fields, so I can actually use this double right arrow to select both of them. We'll click next to continue on. Don't need to sort, so we'll click next on the sort order screen. Again, we do want to display the key field, so I'm going to uncheck that box. We'll click next. Since genre abbreviation is the primary key back in the genres table, for the relationship we want to have it on that field, so we're going to store the genre abbreviation field in the movies table. So we'll go ahead and tell it next. And on this final screen here, we want to enable data integrity, restricting deletes. And then I will click finish to wrap things up. And again, we'll be prompted if we want to save the table so we can create the relationships. So let's go ahead and tell it yes. Sometimes you might get this message that the table has been changed since it was last opened. It gets a little confused sometimes when you're trying to do multiple lookup wizards. Just go ahead and tell it yes to replace the changes. Next, we want to create a field to keep track of the movie's domestic revenue. How much money was made in the US? Let's go ahead and call this field domestic revenue. And the instructions tell us that we want to store this as currency with no decimal places. If we look at the different data types that are available, there is actually one that is specifically designed for currency or working with money. Once I've chosen that data type, down in the decimal places setting and the general tab below, I'm going to go ahead and change it to have 0 decimal places. After that, we'll create a field to store the number of theaters that showed the film. I'm just going to call that one theaters. And we're dealing with numbers, so I'll go ahead and choose the number type. It's going to default to a long integer field size, which can store whole numbers of up to about 2.1 billion, which is really actually more than we need, but it's a good default to work with. So we'll just leave that as is. We'll want to keep track of the movie's release date as well. We'll go ahead and create another field called release date. And the instructions tell us that we want to have this as a date time field with the short date formatting. So under data type, I can go ahead and choose date time. And then down below where we have the format options, I'm going to choose short date, which is basically month/day/year. Our next to last field will ask us to keep track of the film's rating on Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter scale. Let's go ahead and call this field rating. And this is going to be a percentage that we're going to store. So percentages get stored as number types, but percentages internally are decimal values where 100% is represented as 1.0 and like 50% is 0.5. A field size that only works with integers is not going to work right with a percentage. So I'm going to change the field size to the double type. Double is kind of a computer science term, but basically this is one that is capable of storing decimal numbers accurately. I'm going to go ahead and go down to the format line here, and I'm going to tell it that I want to have this as percents. And the instructions say that we should have no decimal places. For our very last field here, we want to keep track of if the movie had age restrictions, like it was rated R or rated X, or if it didn't. We're going to do this using a lookup field, but rather than looking up the values from an existing table, we're just going to specify the values that we want the user to be able to choose from. We're just going to give them yes and no options. So down here in this new row, I'm going to call this field age restrictions. I'll go over to the data type column and I'm going to choose lookup wizard, but this time I'm going to specify that I will type in the values that I want, and I'll click next. On this screen, I'm just going to type in the values that I want the user to be able to choose from, 1 to a row. So we'll put in a yes option and a no option. I'll go ahead and click next. And the instructions say that we want to permit the user to only choose from the values that we specified. So we are going to click the box here to limit to list. And we'll click finish. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here when you use the lookup wizard is that the actual data type that's shown is going to be the type of whatever value is actually getting written into the database. So it's actually going to write text that says yes or no. So the data type that is going to exist for this field is short text. There is a lookup tab down below. For the lookup fields, that tab will give details about what options will be shown on the drop-down list when the person goes and tries to enter data. So here is going to be a combo box that will have the options yes and no available. Let's go ahead and save our changes since we are now finished creating the movies table. Let's go and switch over to datasheet view by clicking the button on the left side of the ribbon here. And we're going to be able to start typing in the values that are given in step 4B. There are 15 movies that we're going to have to create records for. and we just want to go through and enter them in one at a time. The ID field we don't need to give a value for because Access will automatically provide one since we made it be an auto number type. In the movie name field here for the first one, I'm going to type in a Minecraft movie. For the distributor, I'm going to choose from the drop-down list that it's Warner Brothers or WB. The genre for this one was comedy. The domestic revenue was $423,949,195. It was shown in 4,289 theaters and was released on 4/4/25. Its rating was only 47%, and it was not age restricted. So I'll go ahead and choose no from the drop down for age restrictions. We're just going to work through and do all the movies in the table like this. Once you have everything typed in, it should look like what I have on the screen here. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes since I did adjust the column widths, and then I'll close out of the movies table. Now, let's start writing some queries to explore the data that we collected. We'll start off with query 5A. We'll go to the Create ribbon and click on Query Design. Go ahead and close out of these panes so we have a little bit more room to work with. And we want to list for each movie its name, distributor name, genre name, domestic revenue, rating, and release date. So for those fields, we're going to actually have to add all three of our tables here to the query in order to get all of that data. Let's go ahead and resize things so we can see everything. And then I'm just going to go through the list of fields and double click on each of those to go ahead and add them to the grid down below. So we want movie name, distributor name, genre name, domestic revenue, rating, and release date. And the instructions tell us that we want to sort by rating and domestic revenue, both in descending order. So we will go ahead and sort by rating in descending order. And then we want to sort by domestic revenue in descending order. But there's a little bit of a challenge here. When we are sorting on multiple fields, Access is going to sort from left to right. So if we want to sort by rating first, it needs to appear to the left of domestic revenue. So I'm going to go ahead and click in this little header above rating to select that column, and then I can drag it to the left. That way it'll sort by that field first. Let's go ahead and run our query. And we have 15 records, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields appear here in the results. So it's what we're expecting from the instructions. Let's go ahead and save this as query 5A, and we'll click OK, and then we can close out of it. Let's go ahead and work on query 5B. We'll go back to the Create ribbon and click on Query Design again. And for this one, we're going to calculate the amount of revenue for each theater for each movie. We're going to add tables here so that we can get the movie name and domestic revenue and number of theaters. We don't need those other tables because we're not going to use any of the data that they contain. Let's go ahead and add the movie name, domestic revenue, and theaters fields to our grid. And then we're going to have a calculated field for the domestic revenue per theater. So I'll go ahead and click in a blank column, and I'm going to go into Builder, and I'm going to type in the name of the field. We'll have domestic revenue per theater, colon, and then I'll use the little menus down here to go ahead and expand things out. So I'm going to my database, go under Tables, we'll go under Movies, and we want to have the domestic revenue field from the Movies table. Go ahead and type in a slash, and we're going to divide it by the theaters field. I'll select that EXPR and press backspace on my keyboard to get rid of it, and then we'll click OK. Let's go ahead and run our query to see what things look like. And we have our 15 records and our 4 fields. We do need to apply some formatting to that domestic revenue per theater because instructions say that we should have it as currency with no decimal places. So I'm going to click the button here to go back to design view. I'll right click in my calculate field and go to properties. Let's close that to get out of the way here. For the format, I'm going to set this as currency, and I'm going to specify that I want 0 decimal places. The last little bit we need to do is we want to sort by domestic revenue per theater in descending order. So I'm going to go to that calculated field here and go to where it has the sort option and set it to be descending. And I'm going to go ahead and write it again just so I can see what things look like. So we can see that a Minecraft movie had more than twice as much revenue per theater as the lowest ranked one, Thunderbolts. Let's go ahead and save our query here. And this one's going to be query 5B. We'll click OK and then close out of it. Let's continue on to query 5C. We'll go back to the create ribbon, go to query design. And for this one, we're going to display information on movies that had a rating of at least 70%. We want to have the movie name, genre name, and domestic revenue shown. So I'm going to go ahead and add the movies table for the movie name and domestic revenue. And then I'm going to add the genres table so that we can get the genre name. Go ahead and select our movie name field and the genre name field and the domestic revenue field. We also are going to have to select the rating field because that's going to be the field that we'll set our criteria on. I'm going to go down under the criteria row under the rating field here, and I want to have it be that we're displaying things where the value is greater than or equal to 0.7, which is 70%. Percents we're going to express as a decimal number between 0 and 1. The one thing that I want to change here with this criteria is I don't want to have it actually show that field. I really don't care what the rating is. I just want to make sure that I'm using it to filter the results. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the show box. When I run my query, it's going to use the value from that to filter things, but it will not actually display the rating column itself. In my results here, I have 9 records and 3 fields. We didn't need to sort, so we're good there. Let's go ahead and save this. This is going to be query 5C. We'll click OK and close out of it. For query 5D, we're going to calculate some financial statistics for each of the distributors. We'll go back to the create ribbon and click on query design. The query is supposed to display information for each distributor name, so I'm going to need the distributors table added to my query for that. And I'll go ahead and double click on distributor name to add that to my grid. And then I want the sum of its domestic revenue and the per movie average of its domestic revenue. So in order to get that domestic revenue field, I'm going to have to add the movies table to my grid as well. And I'm going to go ahead and actually double click on domestic revenue twice because we're going to use that as the basis for both of those calculations, the sum and the average. Now, since I want to find a sum and I want to find an average for each distributor name, I'm going to have to make this be a totals query. So on the query design ribbon, I'll click the totals button, which will add this total row down below. I want the statistics for each distributor name, so I'm going to group by on that. And I'm going to choose for the first domestic revenue that I want a sum, so I get the total of all the domestic revenue for movies that were released by that distributor. And then I want to find the per movie average for domestic revenue. So under the total row for the second instance of domestic revenue, I'm going to change it to average. Let's go ahead and run our query so that we can see what it looks like. We have our 5 records, and then we have our numbers there. And right now their format is currency. Access figured out that those were currency types from the original values that were back in the movies table. But we do want to set these so that they have no decimal places. So we're going to have to go back into design view and adjust the properties for those fields. So I'll just go to the first domestic revenue, select it just by clicking in it. I'll right click and go to properties. And I'm going to set this format to be currency and 0 decimal places. I'll do the same thing for the other domestic revenue for average. currency with 0 decimal places. Let's go ahead and run this again. Everything's looking good. We have the decimal part chopped off. Let's go ahead and save this one. And this is going to be query 5D. And we'll close it. Our last query, 5E, is going to give us information about each genre. We'll go back to the Create ribbon and do another query in Design View. I'm going to close these panes for now. And we want to know for each genre name the count of its movies, basically how many movies it had, and the average of its domestic revenue. So I'm going to add the genres table so I can get the genre name field. And then to get the count of its movies and average of domestic revenue, I'm going to need to add the movies table. Here, I'm going to choose a field to go and count on. The reality is I can basically choose any of these fields to go ahead and use for a count, but it's very common to go and use the primary key field when you're going to set a count. So I'm going to go ahead and add the ID field since that's my primary key. For the other part here, I want to find the average of domestic revenue. So I'm going to go ahead and add the domestic revenue field. And in order to count and find the average, I'm going to have to make this be a totals query. So I'll click that button up on the query design ribbon. We're going to group by genre name. For the ID field, I'm going to choose that list there and go to count. And for domestic revenue, we'll go ahead and set that to average. Now, when I run the query, we're going to find that we have 7 records. The instructions say that we should have 8. There's one more genre, the other genre, that's not appearing here. And the instructions tell us that our results have to include all genres, even if they have no movies. So we're going to go back to Design View, and we need to adjust the join properties. I'm going to click on that line between the genres table and the movies table, and I'm actually going to right click on it after I've selected it and go to join properties. And down here, I need to choose a different option. The default is to include only rows where the join fields from both tables are equal. Basically, it'll only include the other genre if there are actually movies that have other as their genre type. What we want to do is go to the option here that's going to include all records from genres and only those records from movies where the join fields are equal. So this will include the other type, the other genre, even if it has no movies. With that option selected, I'll go ahead and click OK. You can see that the line actually changes. Now it has a little arrow here, which is a tip off to us that it is not an equal join, or what's technically called an inner join. It's now what's known as a outer join or a left join, because we're only going through and including records from the movies table where they're equal, but we're including all the records from the genres table. When I go and run this query, you can see that we have others showing, and we now have 8 records appearing here. The other count of ID is 0 because there weren't any movies that were in the other genre. And it doesn't have a figure at all for the average domestic revenue because there weren't any matching records for it to be able to find the average for. This is the value that we're expecting to see there. We need to go and format our average domestic revenue so that it's currency with no decimal places. So let's go back into Design View, and we're going to right click on the domestic revenue field, and we'll go into properties. We'll go and set this as currency with 0 decimal places, and we'll run again and take one last look at things. And then let's save this as query 5E. We'll click OK, and we'll close out of it. For step 6, we're going to create a form to make it easier for us to be able to manipulate the data that's in our database. We're going to do this using the form wizard. Let's go to the Create ribbon, and I'm going to click the button under the form section for Form Wizard. We're going to create a form with a subform, which means that we'll have some fields from one table and other fields from a table that has a relationship back to the original table. The instructions tell us that the main form is going to display the full distributor name. So I'm going to go to the distributors table and add the distributor name field by clicking this right arrow. The subform is supposed to display a data sheet with all of the movies table fields. So I'll go to the selector here for which table I want. I'm going to choose the movies table, and then I'll click this double right arrow, which is going to add all of those fields to my form. I'll click next, and this step is going to ask us how do we want to view things. We could view by movies, where it's just one big form, but that's not what we want. The instructions tell us that we actually want to do this as a form with subform. So what's going to happen here is we'll have kind of a parent form that's just going to have the distributor name. And then based off of that distributor name and its associated distributor abbreviation, it's going to load the movies that came from that distributor in the subform that's going to be nested inside. Let's go ahead and click the next button with the form with subform selected. We want the subform to display a data sheet according to the instructions, so that option's good. We'll click next. And it's telling us here that the main form should be called distributor data, and our subform should be distributor data subform. And I'm going to go ahead and click finish, and we can take a look at things. So here you can see our first distributor that it's showing is Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures, and then down in the subform we have the movies that were released by Disney. If I go and click the button here to advance to the next record, it's going to show us the next distributor, in this case Paramount, and Paramount just had one movie, one of the Mission Impossible films. You can advance through the different distributors and then see all of their movies down below. Everything looks good here. So let's go ahead and close out of our main form, which will also close the subform. Step 7 is going to have us create a report to show the contents of Query 5a in a format that will be a little bit easier to print and share with others. The instructions tell us that we want to use the report wizard. So let's go to the Create ribbon, and under the report section, we'll click the Report Wizard button. On this first screen in the wizard, we need to choose that we want to display things from Query 5a. So I'll choose that from the drop-down list, and we're supposed to have all of the fields. So I'm going to click the double right arrow to go ahead and add them all to the selected fields list. And then I'll click next. On this screen, Access is looking at the relationships between the different tables of data involved in this query and giving me a couple different options for how I want to view things. I can view by distributors, by movies, or by genres. Instructions tell me that we want to view by genre. So what we're going to end up with here is a heading that has the genre name, and then beneath that heading, we'll have details about each of the movies within that genre. Let's go ahead and click next to continue on. The instructions don't tell us that we need to specify any more grouping levels, so we'll just click next again. And we're told that we do want to sort by movie name in ascending order. We can use the drop-down options here to choose a field that we want to sort on. And then this button is going to indicate whether we're sorting things in ascending or descending order. If we wanted to do descending, we could just click the button to toggle. But we want to have ascending, so I'm going to switch it back. Let's go ahead and click next. And on this step here, we're asked how the report should be laid out. Instructions tell us we want to use a step layout, but we want to have things with a landscape page orientation. So I'll choose that option and click next. And on the final screen here, we need to give a name for our report. And we're told that we should call this movie summary. And I'll go ahead and click finish. Here we have a preview of what our report's going to look like. And if you take a look at the values, you'll notice that some stuff's getting cut off. In fact, we really can't see anything from the release date. And some of these columns are a lot wider than they need to be. But even still, like in the movie name column here, the name of this last movie from the Mission Impossible series is getting cut off. We're going to have to go and adjust the positioning and the width of our columns so that we can see everything. Let's click the Close Print Preview button to get out of this. And it's going to be a little bit easier to adjust things if we're in layout view. So on the ribbon here on the left side, I'm going to go and choose layout view. Here we can actually see the data that's going to be displayed on the report. That way we can figure out how to size things appropriately. I'm going to close out the property sheet here so I have a little bit more screen real estate. And let's just start off by taking a look at our genre name field, which is way wider than it needs to be. We want to click to select the heading and then hold down the Shift key on our keyboard so that we also select the values. And if I go to the right side, I can drag in to make that column be a lot narrower. For movie name, I'll go ahead and click the heading and then hold down Shift key and click the movie name. I can also go and drag these over. And I'm going to have to make this one a little bit wider just so that I can see the final reckoning down at the bottom. Looks like our distributor name column is wide enough. We just want to go and reposition it over to the left so that it doesn't have all that white space. Same deal with the rating column. We're going to go ahead and move that over to the left. And domestic revenue. With that, we have our last little column here with the release date. And I'm going to select the heading and the values, and I'm just going to resize that column so that we can actually see the full dates. Looks like we're in good shape now. We can actually see everything without getting cut off. So I'm going to go ahead and save my changes, and then we can click out of the movie summary report. For step 8A, we want to create our analysis questions table. So let's go back to the Create ribbon, and under Tables, we'll choose Table Design. We're going to have two fields. The first one is going to be called Question Step, so we can keep track of which step we're answering. And this is really just going to be 2 characters, letters and numbers. So short text is an appropriate data type. And since each of our steps, the actual name of that step, like 9A or 9B, that's going to be unique. This would be a good thing to make be our primary key. So I'm going to click that button under the Table Design ribbon. We also want to have another field that will be called Response. And we're going to have to change our data type because the short text type can only store up to 255 characters, and we might have some responses that need to be longer than that. So instead of short text, I'm going to go to the drop-down list and choose long text. Once I've made that change, I want to go ahead and save my table. So I'll click the Save button here, and I'm going to name this table as Analysis Questions, and I'll click OK. And then let's go ahead over to Datasheet View. We'll click the button on the left side of our ribbon here, and I'm just going to make these columns be wider so that I'll have plenty of space to work as I'm typing things in. I'm also going to make them be a bit taller. And then we'll go ahead and save again so that we have that updated layout stored. With the table in place, we're ready to start answering the analysis questions. And we'll begin with 9A. Question prompt here asks us, how does Rotten Tomatoes calculate its tomato meter rating? And do we think this method accurately represents the quality of a movie? In my response here, I'm noting that the tomato meter ratings are calculated by averaging positive and negative ratings from professional critics. And while this rating is an accurate representation of, at least on average, what critics think, how good a movie is, its quality, is definitely a subjective measure. Different people are going to have different opinions. And it's pretty common for audiences to have different thoughts about a movie than what critics might. For question 9B, the instructions tell us that 12 of the 15 top movies were released on a Friday. And we're asked, why do we think distributors so often choose to release movies on Friday? My answer here is Friday releases make sure that the movies are out in time for the weekend, when people are most likely to be able to go see them. Most people work Monday through Friday, so it's hard to go see a new movie midweek. If things are out on Friday, then people are going to be able to see that movie Friday night or Saturday or Sunday if they're working a traditional schedule. Question 9C notes that several of the top movies were sequels or parts of a series, and were asked why might these films be attractive to production companies. My answer here is it's predictability for the movie companies, less risk. If we are having a sequel that was based on a previous film that performed well, there's a good chance that sequel is going to perform well in the box office as well. If we have a film that's part of a series, there might be other parts that we already know how well they've done because they've already been in the theaters. And the series also have the ability to generate even more movies potentially down the line if there were additional books that they could go back to film more movies off of. Question 9D asks if, other than the day of the week, we see any patterns in when movies were released, and we're asked to explain why or why not. My answer here is that a lot of the release dates are clustered around holidays. People tend to have time off at holidays, so they're more likely to be able to go to the theater and watch a film. If we take a look in the movies table, we can see, for example, that we have a couple films that were coming out in late May around Memorial Day. So like we have Lilo and Stitch here on May 23rd, and one of the Mission Impossible films also on May 23rd. We have some that were coming out around July 4th, like we have Jurassic World Rebirth on July 2nd. We have F1 the movie at the end of June. We have some other ones that are around Thanksgiving or Christmas. So like we have one that came out December 19th, and we have some that were coming out late November around Thanksgiving time. So generally you'll kind of see around when holidays are, there will tend to be movies coming out at that point in time. For question 9E, we're asked what other ways can distributors make money from films other than domestic ticket sales? My answer here is there's a bunch of ways. You have international ticket sales, but you also have things like soundtracks, video games, merchandise, novelizations, giving rights to the characters to include in other companies' promotions, stuff like that. There's a lot of ways that you can go and generate money off of a film. So with that last question answered, let's go ahead and close out of our analysis questions table. Let's finish things up by going to the Database Tools ribbon and clicking the Compact and Repair Database button. You might get a message that the file is already in use if you have it stored in a folder that's being synced with the cloud, like OneDrive or Google Drive, or if you have antivirus software that's currently scanning your database. It's okay if that happens. You can just tell it okay, and you can just move on. It's not critical that this step be done. It just basically will shrink the database so it'll be a smaller file to upload. But if you're not able to successfully do this, not a big deal. Just go ahead and move on. And since we're done, we can go ahead and close out of Access at this point. That completes our project. If this was your actual homework, you would be ready to submit now. Since this is a homework help project, though, please do not turn in your file. If you need more help with completing Homework 4, the CS 101 and Lane Department Learning Centers are available to assist you. You can also email your section instructor for help. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.